The wind howled like a wounded lion across the black water, tearing at the sails of the luxury yacht Sankofa's Dream, now listing dangerously to starboard. The deck, once a glittering stage of champagne flutes and laughter, was slick with rain and blood. A single lantern swayed from the mast, casting long, trembling shadows that danced like spirits across the planks. Beneath it, a woman knelt, her bare feet pressing into the wet wood, her hands gripping the edge of the deck as she peered into the churning sea. She was drenched, her hair matted to her face, her simple white uniform torn at the shoulder. Her name was Amara, a waitress, a nobody, a daughter of the river. Below, the ocean roared like a caged beast, swallowing the last cries of the man who had just fallen. Tunde Okafor, the billionaire CEO, the king of Lagos Towers, the man who once said, "The sea respects only those who own it." Now he was drowning in it. Amara didn't hesitate. She didn't look back at the others, his bodyguards, his investors, his wife, all frozen in shock, clutching their phones, their diamonds, their excuses. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't care about the storm. She didn't care that the waves were taller than the yacht's mast, that the wind screamed like a sangoma in trance. She jumped. The cold hit her like a slap from the ancestors. The salt stung her eyes. The current yanked at her like 1,000 hands, dragging her down, down into the dark. She kicked, arms flailing, lungs burning. Then, there, a flash of white silk, a hand, pale and limp, vanishing beneath the foam. She dove, and the sea closed over her like a tomb. But let us go back. Let us walk the winding path that led Amara to this moment, where a poor girl from the mangroves would become the only soul brave enough to face the wrath of the deep, while the rich and powerful watched, paralyzed by fear and pride. It began not on a yacht, but on the banks of the Lekki Lagoon, where the morning mist curled like smoke over the water, and the air smelled of fish, palm oil, and the faint sweetness of ripe soursop. The village of Eko Orun, the village of the sky, sat on stilts, its homes built of bamboo and thatch, their walls painted with ochre and indigo in patterns passed down from grandmothers who once danced under the full moon with the egungun. Amara was born here, the youngest of 7, daughter of Mama Neka, a weaver of adire cloth, and Papa Chukwu, a fisherman who could read the tides by the flight of the Agba bird. They lived in a house no bigger than a goat pen, but it was full of laughter, stories, and the scent of a goosey soup bubbling in a blackened pot. Amara, Mama Neka would say, "You were born with the nkwa of the river. You hear things others do not. You see things others miss. The water speaks to you." And it did. As a child, Amara would sit at the edge of the lagoon, barefoot, her toes curling into the mud, and whisper to the waves. She'd tell them of her dreams, of becoming a teacher, of building a school on the water, of healing the children who fell ill from the polluted river. The elders said such dreams were dangerous. "The river gives," Old Man Easy would say, his voice like dry palm fronds, "but she also takes. She does not forgive greed. She does not forget betrayal." But Amara did not listen. She was too full of hope. When she was 12, a storm came, the great wind of '98, and the lagoon rose like a living thing, swallowing homes, crops, lives. Amara's father was swept away while trying to save the village's sacred Ofo staff, carved from Ogbo wood and blessed by the river priest. He was never found. That night, Mama Neka sat by the fire, her face lined with grief, and said, "The river took him because he tried to control it. He thought he could outwit the current. But the river is not a servant, it is a mother, and mothers do not like to be disrespected." Amara wept. But deep inside, a seed was planted, not of fear, but of understanding. The river was not cruel, it was just. It gave life, but demanded respect. She grew strong. She learned to swim before she could walk. She could dive 10 feet and come up with a fish in her hand. She could read the sky, the birds, the ripples, the language of the wild. The villagers called her Amara the Listener. Some said she had the spirit of the river in her veins. But life in Eko Orun was hard. The fish were fewer now. The water tasted bitter. The government built a new highway along the shore, and with it came pollution, chemicals, plastic, waste. The lagoon, once clear as morning dew, was now choked with foam and dead algae. When Amara turned 18, Mama Neka fell ill, a fever that wouldn't break. The Dibia said it was a debt from the river, that the family had not given enough thanks, had not honored the ancestors properly. He prescribed herbs, a sacrifice, a white chicken, a pot of ogbano, and a prayer at the river's edge. But the medicine cost money, and money was scarce. So Amara made a choice. She left the village. She boarded a bus to Lagos, her only belongings a small bag, a woven mat from her mother, and a promise. I will return with money, with medicine, with a future. Lagos swallowed her whole. The city was a beast, a roaring, honking, glittering, suffocating beast. Skyscrapers scraped the sky. Neon signs flickered like dying stars. The air was thick with exhaust, sweat, and the scent of roasted suya from roadside stalls. Amara walked the streets barefoot at first, her feet raw, her heart pounding. She found work where she could, washing clothes in a back alley, selling akara at dawn, cleaning offices at night. But it wasn't enough. Then, one rainy evening, she walked into the Golden Oyster, a high-end seafood restaurant on Victoria Island. The hostess, a woman named Bisi with hair like a lion's mane, looked her up and down. "You look like you've never seen a plate of food before," Bisi said. Amara smiled. "I've seen many, but I've never served one." Bisi laughed. "You're honest. I like that. But can you handle rich people? They're worse than sharks." Amara thought of the river. "I've faced worse." She got the job. The Golden Oyster was a world of its own. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waiters in black suits, and customers who spoke in accents that sounded like money. Amara learned quickly. She remembered names. She knew which wine paired with which fish. She could carry 3 trays at once, balancing them like a dancer. But more than that, she listened. She heard the whispers behind the laughter. She heard the investor who said, "The lagoon is just a dump. Fill it in, build a mall." She heard the politician who joked, "The poor live on the water, let them learn to swim." She heard the CEO of Okafor Holdings, Tunde Okafor, say over dinner one night, "The environment, it's a myth. Progress has no time for sentiment. If the river dies, we'll build a new one." Amara froze. That night, she went home and cried. Not for herself, for the river, for her father, for the children who would never see a clean lagoon. But she said nothing. She kept her head down. She worked harder. She saved every naira. And then one day, BC pulled her aside. "You're good, Amara. Too good for this place. I know a man, a rich man. He's throwing a yacht party, floating palace, champagne, the whole thing. He needs staff. I told him about you. You're in." Amara hesitated. "A yacht? On the sea?" BC grinned. "Yes, you'll wear a uniform, serve drinks, smile, and get paid 10 times what you make here." Amara thought of her mother, the medicine, the promise. "I'll do it," she said. The night of the party arrived. The Sankofa's dream was a floating dream, white, sleek, with 3 decks, a helipad, and a glass-bottomed pool. It was moored just beyond the breakers, where the lagoon met the open sea. The guests arrived in speedboats, in limos, in the helicopters that landed on the deck with a roar. Amara stood at attention in her crisp white uniform, her hair braided tight, her shoes polished. She looked around at the guests, men in tailored suits, women dripping in gold, children in designer clothes sipping juice from crystal cups. They laughed, they danced, they ignored the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Tunde Okafor stood at the center of it all. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice like thunder and a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore a white silk suit, unbuttoned, a cigar in one hand, a glass of cognac in the other. He moved through the crowd like a king, shaking hands, making deals, promising fortunes. "Tonight," he declared to a group of investors, "we celebrate the future. The Okafor Marina, a private paradise on the lagoon. No more stench, no more poor people. Just luxury, just progress." Amara served him a drink. He didn't look at her. "You," he said, pointing. "Bring me another and make it stronger. I need to forget the smell of this city." She brought it. He drank it. He didn't thank her. But she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of fear, as if he knew deep down that the river was listening. The storm broke at midnight. The wind came first, howling, shrieking, tearing at the sails. The lights flickered. The music stopped. The guests gasped, clutching their phones, their jewels, their egos. Then the waves came. The yacht rocked like a toy. Champagne flutes shattered, a table overturned. A woman screamed as a wave crashed over the railing, drenching her fur coat. Tunde laughed. "Relax," he shouted over the wind. "This is nothing. I've sailed through typhoons. The sea obeys me." But the sea had other plans. A rogue wave, taller than the mast, dark as the belly of a crocodile, rose from the deep and slammed into the starboard side. The yacht heaved. People screamed. A child fell. A man lost his footing. And Tunde, who had stepped too close to the edge, who had laughed at the storm, who had declared himself master of the waves, slipped. One moment he was standing, shouting orders. The next, he was gone, vanished beneath the foam. The deck erupted in chaos. "Call the Coast Guard," a woman shrieked. "Get the lifeboats," a man yelled. But no one moved. The bodyguards stood frozen, their eyes wide, their hands clutching their radios like talismans. Tunde's wife, Neka, yes, Neka, the same name as Amara's mother, sank to her knees, sobbing. He's gone. Why didn't anyone save him?" But no one stepped forward, no one jumped. Because they were rich, because they were safe, because the sea was dangerous, because someone else would do it. And then, Amara. She didn't think, she didn't hesitate. She ran to the railing, kicked off her shoes, and dove. The water hit her like 1,000 knives. She surfaced, gasping, the wind tearing at her hair. She scanned the waves, nothing, just foam, darkness, the roar of the storm. She dove again, down into the green-black abyss. Her lungs burned, her eyes stung. The current pulled at her, trying to claim her too. And then, she saw it, a flash of white silk, a hand, a face. Tunde, eyes wide with terror, mouth open, bubbles rising like a curse. She reached for him. He grabbed her arm, hard, like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. But he was heavy, and the current was stronger. She kicked, pulling him toward the surface, but the weight dragged her down. She felt her strength fading. And then, a voice, not in her ears, in her bones. "You are not alone." It was the river, the lagoon, the water itself. She remembered her father, his last words before he walked into the storm. The river does not take without reason, but it does not let go of those who respect it. She closed her eyes, and she let go, not of Tunde, but of her fear. She stopped fighting the current. She joined it. She let the water carry her, guide her, breathe for her. She became part of the flow. And then she rose, with Tunde in her arms. They broke the surface, gasping, choking, alive. The yacht was still rocking, but the crew had finally lowered a lifeboat. Hands reached down. Tunde was pulled up, coughing, trembling, alive. But Amara? They forgot her. She floated in the water, exhausted, half drowned, watching as the rich man was wrapped in a blanket, given water, comforted. No one looked for her. No one called her name. She swam back to the yacht, pulled herself up the ladder, and collapsed on the deck. She lay there shivering, watching as Tunde, still weak, turned to his wife and said, "Who saved me?" Neka pointed. "That girl, the waitress." Tunde looked at Amara. His eyes narrowed. "You?" he said. "You jumped in?" Amara nodded, too tired to speak. Tunde stared at her. Then slowly he walked over and knelt beside her. "Why?" he asked. "You didn't have to do that. You could have died." Amara looked up at him. Her voice was hoarse, but clear. "Because the river does not choose who it saves," she said, "only who is willing to listen." Tunde was silent. Then he said, "I owe you my life." Amara smiled weakly. "No, you owe the river. I was just the messenger." The storm passed by dawn. The sun rose over the lagoon, painting the sky in gold and pink. The Sankofa's dream limped back to shore, its hull dented, its sails torn. Amara was taken to a hospital. She had hypothermia, a sprained shoulder, and a deep cut on her leg from the coral. But she would live. Tunde visited her. He came alone, no bodyguards, no entourage. He brought a single white lily, a flower of the river said to bloom only where the water is pure. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting by her bed, "about what you said, about the river, about everything." Amara watched him. "I've spent my life building towers," he continued. "Skyscrapers, malls, luxury homes. I thought progress meant concrete, steel, money. But last night, the sea reminded me of something." "What?" Amara asked. "That I am not in control, that the earth, the water, the sky, they are not for us to conquer. They are for us to honor." He leaned forward. "I'm canceling the Okafor Marina." Amara's eyes widened. "I'm not building a mall on the lagoon," he said. "I'm turning it into a sanctuary, a protected zone. No construction, no pollution, just the river, just the people who live there." Amara's heart swelled. "And," he added, "I'm funding a school, a real one, for the children of the lagoon, with clean water, with teachers, with hope." He paused. "And I want you to run it." Amara stared at him. "Me? Yes. You know the river. You listened to it, you respected it, and you saved my life, not because you had to, but because you chose to. That's the kind of leader we need." Amara closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks. My father, she whispered, he died trying to save the village's sacred staff. He believed the river was sacred, that we had a duty to protect it. Tunde nodded. Then let this be his legacy. Weeks passed. The news spread through Lagos like wildfire. The CEO who almost drowned has changed his mind. He's saving the lagoon. He's building a school. He's hiring a waitress to lead it. People laughed. They called it a publicity stunt. They said Tunde was just trying to save face. But Amara knew better. She returned to Echo Orun. The village had changed. The water was cleaner. The fish were returning. The children played on the banks again, laughing, splashing, free. The school was being built on stilts, just like the homes, but with solar panels, rainwater collectors, and a library with books on the environment, on African history, on the power of listening. Amara stood at the edge of the lagoon, barefoot, her hands on her hips, watching the sun set over the water. Mama Neka, now recovered, stood beside her. "You did it, my daughter," she said, her voice thick with pride. "You brought the river back." Amara smiled. "I didn't do it alone. The river helped. The ancestors helped. Even him helped." Mama Neka nodded. "The ancestors say, the one who listens to the wind will hear the truth. The one who respects the river will never drown." Amara looked at the water. A ripple spread across the surface like a hand waving hello. And then a voice, soft like the rustle of reeds, whispered on the breeze. "You are not just the listener, you are the bridge." Years passed, the school grew. It became a center of learning, of healing, of community. Children from all over Lagos came to study there. Elders came to teach traditional knowledge, fishing, weaving, storytelling. Scientists came to study the rebirth of the lagoon. Tunde Okafor visited often. He was different now, quieter, humbler. He wore simple clothes. He listened more than he spoke. He even learned to swim. One day he asked Amara, "Do you think the river forgives me for what I plan to do?" Amara looked at him. The river does not forgive. It remembers. But it also gives second chances. You chose to change. That is what matters. He nodded. "Then I will spend the rest of my life making amends." And he did. He founded the River Guardians, a foundation that protected waterways across Nigeria. He funded cleanup projects, education, and advocacy. He even wrote a book, The Day the Sea Spoke, about his experience and how a poor waitress saved more than his life. But the most powerful moment came at the annual Festival of the Lagoon, held every year on the anniversary of the storm. Amara stood at the center of the village, surrounded by children, elders, and visitors. The air was thick with the scent of jollof rice, pepper soup, and burning camphor for the ancestors. She raised her voice, strong and clear. "Today, we celebrate not just the river," she said, "but the choices we make." The rich man chose to listen. The poor girl chose to act. The river chose to give. She paused. "And the ancestors remind us, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children." The crowd erupted in cheers. Later that night, as the moon rose over the lagoon, Amara sat by the water, her feet in the shallows. Tunde approached, holding a small wooden box. "I have something for you," he said. He opened it. Inside was the Ovo staff, her father's sacred staff, carved with symbols of the river, the sky, and the ancestors. "I found it," Tunde said. "In the mud, near the old dock. It was waiting for you." Amara took it. Her hands trembled. "My father," she whispered, "he died saving this. And you," Tunde said, "lived to return it." She held the staff to her heart, and then from the water, a ripple, a flash of silver. A fish leapt, glinting in the moonlight, and landed back in the lagoon with a soft plop. Amara smiled. "The river," she said, "is speaking again." Years later, when Amara was old, her hair white as the foam on the waves, she would sit by the school's edge and tell the children stories. She told them of the storm, of the CEO, of the night she jumped. But most of all, she told them of the lesson. The rich man had everything, she would say, her voice soft but strong. Money, power, influence. But when the sea took him, none of it mattered. Only one person tried to save him, a poor girl, a nobody. Why? The children would lean in. "Because," she said, "courage is not bought, it is grown. It is watered with respect. It is fed by the truth." She paused. "The river does not care about your title. It does not care about your bank account. It only cares if you listen, if you respect, if you act." She looked at the children. "And so should we." One day, a young boy asked her, "Grandmother Amara, what if I'm poor? What if I have nothing?" Can I still make a difference? Amara smiled. My child, the river does not ask how much you have. It only asks, will you jump? And with that, she would close her eyes and the wind would carry her words across the lagoon, to the trees, to the birds, to the deep, dark water below. And the river, always listening, would whisper back, yes, you can. Because in the end, it was never about wealth or power. It was about choice. The choice to listen, the choice to act, the choice to jump. And in that moment, when the world is watching, when the storm is raging, when the rich are frozen in fear, the true measure of a person is not what they own, but what they give. The river remembers. The ancestors watch. And the world needs more Amaras, more who listen, more who act, more who believe that even the smallest voice can change the current. So remember this, child of the earth, child of the water. The hand that gives is never empty. The heart that listens is never lost. And the one who jumps into the storm may just save the world. If this story touched your spirit, if the river whispered to you, then carry it forward. Subscribe to African Haven Tales, where the ancestors speak, the rivers remember, and every story is a bridge to wisdom.